In a small town nestled in the heart of Ohio, there was a diner that everyone loved. It wasn't fancy or modern, but it had a charm that made people feel at home. The walls were painted a warm yellow, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with sizzling bacon greeted anyone who walked through the door. Families came for Sunday breakfasts, truck drivers stopped by during long hauls, and locals gathered to catch up over plates of pancakes and burgers. For decades, the diner had been a cornerstone of the community, a place where everyone felt welcome. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky orange and pink, the diner buzzed with its usual energy. Waitresses moved quickly between tables, balancing trays of food while exchanging friendly banter with customers. A young couple sat near the window, laughing softly as they shared a plate of fries. An older man sipped his coffee in the corner, reading the day's newspaper. Everything seemed ordinary, just another night at the cozy little restaurant. But no one could have guessed that this evening would change everything, for the diner, for the town, and especially for one man who was about to walk through its doors. The bell above the entrance jingled softly as the door opened. Everyone turned to look, curious about the newcomer. Standing there was a man who looked out of place among the cheerful crowd. His clothes were tattered, patched together in spots to cover holes. His shoes were scuffed, and his face bore the marks of someone who had weathered many storms. Despite his appearance, there was a quiet dignity in the way he held himself. He hesitated for a moment, scanning the room before stepping inside. The warmth of the diner enveloped him, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. The staff greeted him politely, though their smiles faltered slightly when they noticed his disheveled state. No one said anything rude, but the subtle shift in their body language spoke volumes. Still, the man didn't seem bothered. He walked slowly toward the counter, his eyes fixed on the menu board hanging above. The clatter of dishes and chatter of patrons filled the air, but he seemed lost in thought, as if trying to decide whether he belonged here at all. When he finally reached the counter, he pulled a handful of coins from his pocket and placed them carefully on the surface. "I'd like to buy a meal," he said softly, his voice raspy but steady. The cashier glanced at the coins, then back at him. "That's not enough," she replied gently, her tone apologetic. The man nodded, his expression unreadable. Without another word, he turned to leave, his shoulders slumped as if carrying an invisible weight. As he pushed open the door and stepped back into the cold, something inside the diner shifted. The cheerful hum of conversation dimmed slightly, replaced by an awkward silence. No one knew it yet, but this simple interaction would soon become the talk of the town, and far beyond. Unbeknownst to anyone present, the entire scene had been recorded by the security camera mounted high on the wall. The camera captured every detail: the man's hesitant steps, the polite but strained interactions, and the quiet resignation on his face as he left empty-handed. What happened next would expose not only the flaws of the diner, but also the kindness of strangers and the power of a single act caught on tape. Later that night, after the last customer had left and the staff locked up for the evening, one of the employees decided to review the footage. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just routine checks to ensure everything ran smoothly. But when she replayed the events of the evening, her stomach sank. Watching the man being turned away stirred something deep within her. She couldn't shake the feeling that what she saw was wrong, not just because of the rules, but because of basic human decency. After sitting alone in the quiet diner for several minutes, she made a decision that would alter the course of events forever. Using her phone, she uploaded the clip to social media, adding a short caption explaining what had happened. "This man came in tonight asking for food. We refused him because he didn't have enough money. Is this who we are?" she wrote. At first, the post went unnoticed, buried among countless other updates flooding the internet. But as dawn broke over the sleepy town, the video began to gain traction. People started sharing it, commenting on it, and tagging friends. By mid-morning, it had gone viral, sparking outrage and disbelief across the country. The backlash was swift and fierce. Thousands of people condemned the diner, accusing it of lacking compassion and humanity. Some called for boycotts, vowing never to step foot inside again. Others defended the employee who posted the video, praising her courage for speaking out. Amid the storm of criticism, however, some viewers noticed something remarkable about the man in the footage. Despite being humiliated and rejected, he remained calm and composed. There was no anger in his eyes, no raised voice or dramatic exit, just quiet acceptance, as if he had grown accustomed to such treatment. This detail struck a chord with many, prompting questions about who he was and why he had been treated so poorly. As the story spread, local reporters took notice. Intrigued by the mystery surrounding the man, they began investigating further. They combed through public records, interviewed residents, and pieced together fragments of information. Slowly, a clearer picture emerged. The man's name was James, and he was more than just a faceless figure in a viral video. He was a veteran who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, risking his life for his country. When he returned home, he struggled to adjust to civilian life. Haunted by memories of war and battling severe PTSD, he found it difficult to hold down a job. Over time, his relationships crumbled, and he ended up on the streets, surviving day by day with whatever scraps he could find. Learning about James's past added a new layer of complexity to the story. Viewers who had initially focused their anger on the diner now directed their attention to the broader issue of homelessness among veterans. How could someone who sacrificed so much end up abandoned and forgotten? The question resonated deeply, igniting conversations about systemic failures and societal indifference. Charitable organizations sprang into action, raising funds and offering resources to support homeless veterans like James. Meanwhile, the diner faced mounting pressure to address the incident and make amends for its actions, or lack thereof. Despite the growing media frenzy, James remained largely unaware of the impact his brief visit to the diner had caused. He continued living his life as he always had, keeping to himself and avoiding attention. But the world around him was changing rapidly. Strangers reached out, wanting to help. Journalists knocked on doors, seeking interviews. Even the diner itself issued a public apology, though many dismissed it as too little too late. Through it all, James maintained his composure, refusing to let bitterness take root. In fact, when he finally agreed to speak publicly, his words carried a message of hope and forgiveness that surprised everyone, including himself. Though James's journey was far from over, the ripple effects of that single night continued to spread. The diner became a symbol of both failure and redemption, forced to confront its shortcomings and strive for better. The community rallied together, determined to turn a painful lesson into an opportunity for growth. And James, once invisible to those around him, now stood as a testament to resilience and the enduring power of humanity, even in the face of adversity. The morning after the video went viral, the small Ohio town woke up to a storm of headlines. News outlets across the country picked up the story, amplifying the outrage that had begun online. Screens everywhere showed the same grainy footage of James, the homeless veteran, being turned away from the diner. Social media feeds were flooded with posts about the incident, each one adding fuel to the fire. People shared their anger, disappointment, and disbelief at how a man who had served his country could be treated so cruelly. The diner's name became synonymous with insensitivity, and calls for accountability grew louder by the hour. For the staff at the diner, the backlash was overwhelming. When they arrived for work that day, they found protesters gathered outside, holding signs that read, "Shame on you" and "Where is your compassion?" Some held pictures of James, while others chanted slogans demanding justice. Inside, phones rang nonstop as reporters sought statements, and customers bombarded the staff with questions. The once friendly atmosphere of the diner had vanished, replaced by tension and unease. Even regular patrons seemed hesitant to enter, unsure of how to react to the controversy swirling around their favorite spot. Meanwhile, the young couple who had tried to help James became unexpected heroes in the unfolding drama. Their simple act of kindness, offering to pay for his meal, had been overshadowed by the manager's refusal, but now it gained recognition. Social media users praised them for their generosity, calling them a beacon of hope in an otherwise disheartening situation. Messages poured in thanking them for standing up when others looked away. Overwhelmed by the attention, the couple released a brief statement saying they only did what anyone should have done. "We didn't think twice," they wrote. It was the right thing to do. As the days passed, the spotlight shifted back to James. Reporters tracked him down in the park where he often slept, camping out nearby in hopes of speaking with him. At first, James avoided them, uncomfortable with the sudden interest in his life. He wasn't used to being noticed, let alone celebrated. But eventually, a local charity intervened, arranging a meeting between James and a trusted journalist. In a quiet corner of the park, surrounded by trees shedding their autumn leaves, James finally opened up about his journey. He spoke softly, choosing his words carefully. "I never wanted this kind of attention," he admitted. "All I wanted was a warm meal and maybe a little respect." His voice cracked as he recounted his time in the military, the pride he felt serving his country, the horrors he witnessed overseas, and the struggles he faced upon returning home. He described how PTSD made everyday tasks feel impossible, how losing his job led to losing his apartment, and how shame kept him from reaching out for help. Yet despite everything, James remained hopeful. "I still believe people are good at heart," he said. "This has shown me that." His words resonated deeply with those who heard them. Many viewers were moved to tears, not just by his story, but by his resilience and grace. Instead of bitterness or anger, James offered forgiveness and understanding. This struck a chord with millions of people, inspiring acts of kindness across the nation. Donations poured into veterans organizations, food banks, and shelters. Strangers reached out to offer support, whether through money, resources, or simply messages of encouragement. For the first time in years, James began to feel like someone cared. Back at the diner, things weren't going well. The owner, desperate to salvage the business's reputation, issued a public apology. In a televised interview, he expressed regret for what had happened and promised changes to ensure no one would ever be turned away again. "We failed as a community," he said, "but we're committed to doing better." While some appreciated the effort, others dismissed it as too little, too late. Protesters continued to gather outside, and sales plummeted as boycotts took effect. Employees struggled under the weight of public scrutiny, unsure of how to move forward. Amidst the chaos, something remarkable began to happen. The diner started receiving letters, not just complaints, but heartfelt notes from people sharing their own experiences. Some wrote about loved ones who had served in the military and fallen on hard times. Others shared stories of struggling with homelessness or mental health issues. These letters reminded everyone involved that James's story wasn't unique. It was part of a much larger issue affecting countless individuals. Slowly, the focus began to shift from blame to action. Community leaders organized meetings to discuss ways to address homelessness and support veterans. Local businesses pledged to hire more veterans and provide training programs. Even schools got involved, teaching students about empathy and service. For James, life began to change in ways he never imagined. Charitable organizations worked together to secure him temporary housing, ensuring he had a safe place to stay during the winter months. A counselor specializing in PTSD offered free therapy sessions, helping him process the trauma he had carried for so long. Job opportunities arose, including one from a local warehouse owner who admired James's humility and determination. Though hesitant at first, James accepted the offer, eager to rebuild his life step by step. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Adjusting to structured routines after years on the streets wasn't easy, and old habits died hard. There were moments of frustration and self-doubt, times when James questioned whether he deserved the second chance he'd been given. But every setback was met with support, from friends he hadn't realized he had, from strangers who reached out, and even from former adversaries like the diner staff who visited him to personally apologize. Each gesture, no matter how small, reinforced the idea that he mattered. As weeks turned into months, the town transformed in subtle yet significant ways. The diner, once vilified, became a hub for charitable initiatives. Every weekend, volunteers prepared meals for the homeless and distributed care packages to those in need. Signs outside the building advertised fundraisers and awareness campaigns, inviting the community to come together for a greater cause. Inside, employees wore pins that read, "Everyone is welcome here," a reminder of the lesson they had learned the hard way. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a step toward healing and growth. Through it all, James remained a symbol of hope. His quiet strength and unwavering optimism inspired those around him to strive for better. Though he never sought fame or recognition, his story touched lives far beyond the confines of the small Ohio town. It reminded people of the power of compassion, the importance of looking beyond appearances, and the impact of a single act caught on camera. And while the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. James's journey was far from over, and neither was the ripple effect of that fateful night at the diner. As the weeks went by, the small Ohio town continued to grapple with the aftermath of the viral video. The diner, once a beloved fixture in the community, was now at the center of heated debates about compassion and accountability. Protesters still gathered outside, their signs growing more creative as the days passed. Some read, "Feed people, not profits, and heroes deserve better." Inside, the staff worked tirelessly to keep the business running despite dwindling customers. The atmosphere was tense, with employees exchanging nervous glances whenever someone new walked through the door. Everyone knew the diner's reputation had been tarnished, and rebuilding trust wouldn't be easy. The owner, Mr. Thompson, tried his best to make amends. He hired a consultant to help revamp the diner's policies, ensuring they aligned with values of inclusivity and kindness. New training sessions were held for employees, focusing on how to handle difficult situations with empathy. But no matter what steps he took, criticism followed. Some people accused him of using the controversy as a publicity stunt, while others argued that apologies couldn't erase years of neglect. For every supportive comment online, there were dozens more calling for boycotts or harsher consequences. The pressure weighed heavily on Mr. Thompson, who often stayed late into the night sitting alone in his office and staring at pictures of happier times when the diner was just a place where people came to eat. Amidst all this turmoil, James found himself adjusting to a life he hadn't dreamed possible. With temporary housing secured, he finally had a roof over his head, a modest apartment provided by a local charity. It wasn't much, but it felt like a palace compared to the park bench he used to call home. Every morning, he woke up early, brewing coffee in the tiny kitchenette and watching sunlight stream through the window. For the first time in years, he could take a hot shower without worrying about being rushed out of a shelter. These small comforts brought tears to his eyes, reminding him of everything he had missed. Therapy sessions became a regular part of James's routine. At first, opening up to a stranger about his past was daunting. Memories of war haunted him. Flashes of gunfire, cries of pain, and faces of fallen comrades lingered in his mind. Talking about these experiences left him drained but also lighter, as if shedding layers of guilt and grief. His therapist, a kind woman named Sarah, encouraged him to write down his thoughts in a journal. Slowly, James began filling its pages with fragments of his story, the pride of enlisting, the horrors of combat, and the loneliness of returning home. Writing gave him a sense of control, a way to process emotions that had long gone unspoken. Work at the warehouse proved challenging, yet rewarding. James started as a sorter, organizing boxes and loading shipments onto trucks. Though physically demanding, the job gave him purpose. His co-workers, initially wary of his quiet demeanor, soon warmed up to him. They noticed how diligently he worked, often staying late to finish tasks or help others. During breaks, they shared stories and laughter, drawing James into conversations about sports, music, and family. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere, like he was part of something bigger than himself. When his boss offered him a permanent position, James accepted with gratitude, knowing it was another step toward stability. Back at the diner, changes were beginning to take root. Inspired by the community's response, Mr. Thompson partnered with local organizations to host weekly outreach events. On Saturday mornings, volunteers served free breakfast to anyone in need, homeless, individuals, struggling families, and veterans alike. Tables were set up outside, decorated with colorful balloons and handmade posters welcoming everyone. The aroma of pancakes and bacon wafted through the air, mingling with the sound of cheerful chatter. Staff members who had once turned James away now greeted guests with warm smiles, determined to prove they had changed. These efforts didn't go unnoticed. Slowly, people began returning to the diner, curious to see the transformation for themselves. Regular patrons brought friends, eager to support the positive shift. Even some former critics showed up, cautiously optimistic about giving the establishment another chance. Business wasn't booming yet, but there was hope, a fragile, flickering flame that everyone worked hard to protect. Employees took pride in their roles, knowing they were contributing to something meaningful. For the first time in months, laughter echoed through the diner's walls again. Meanwhile, James's story continued to inspire acts of kindness across the nation. Schools incorporated lessons about empathy into their curriculums, using his experience as an example of why compassion matters. Churches and community centers organized drives to collect clothing, food, and toiletries for homeless shelters. Veterans groups launched campaigns to raise awareness about PTSD and mental health resources. Social media remained abuzz with updates, photos, and messages of encouragement. Strangers sent letters to James, thanking him for reminding them of humanity's potential for good. Each note reinforced his belief that change was possible, even in the darkest moments. Despite the progress, challenges persisted. Adjusting to structured routines after years on the streets wasn't easy for James. There were days when anxiety overwhelmed him, making it hard to focus at work or sleep at night. Old habits resurfaced, like hoarding food or avoiding crowded spaces. But instead of hiding these struggles, James leaned on the support system he had built. Friends checked in regularly, offering rides to therapy or inviting him over for dinner. Co-workers noticed when he seemed off and gently encouraged him to take breaks. Even the diner staff reached out, sending care packages and handwritten notes to show they cared. One evening, as snow blanketed the ground and lights twinkled in windows, James attended a holiday gathering hosted by the warehouse team. It was a cozy event, held in the break room decorated with tinsel and garlands. Someone had baked cookies and a playlist of classic Christmas songs played softly in the background. As James stood awkwardly near the door, unsure of what to do, one of his co-workers handed him a mug of hot cocoa. "You're part of the family now," she said with a smile. Those simple words brought tears to his eyes, not because of sadness, but because of joy. For so long he had felt invisible, forgotten by the world. Now, surrounded by people who genuinely cared, he realized he wasn't alone anymore. The diner, too, embraced the spirit of the season. Employees volunteered extra hours to prepare meals for outreach events determined to spread cheer. They decorated the interior with wreaths and fairy lights, transforming the space into a festive haven. Customers donated toys and blankets, piling them high in a corner designated for charity. Even protesters softened their stance, acknowledging the efforts being made. Though tensions lingered, there was a growing sense of unity, a shared commitment to creating a better future. By the end of the year, both James and the diner had come a long way. What had started as a shameful moment captured on camera had evolved into a catalyst for change. People learned valuable lessons about judgment, forgiveness, and second chances. Mistakes were acknowledged, apologies were accepted, and bridges were rebuilt. Most importantly, lives were touched. Not just James's, but countless others inspired by his journey. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, one truth stood clear. Compassion, when nurtured, had the power to heal wounds and transform communities. And in that small Ohio town, hope burned brighter than ever before. As the new year began, the small Ohio town carried with it a sense of cautious optimism. The diner, once a symbol of division, was slowly becoming a beacon of unity. Every Saturday morning, volunteers gathered to prepare meals for those in need, their laughter and chatter filling the air as they worked together. The outreach events drew more people each week, some coming for food, others to lend a hand. Families brought their children, teaching them the importance of giving back. Even former protesters joined in, rolling up their sleeves to help serve plates of hot meals. It was clear that something special was happening here, a quiet revolution fueled by kindness. For James, life continued to improve in ways he never thought possible. His job at the warehouse became a steady anchor, providing not just income but also camaraderie. He formed bonds with his co-workers, who treated him like family. They teased him about his love for strong coffee and celebrated when he completed his first full month without missing a day. At home, James spent evenings writing in his journal or reading books lent to him by Sarah, his therapist. She encouraged him to explore hobbies he had abandoned during his years on the streets, suggesting painting or gardening. Though hesitant at first, James eventually picked up a paintbrush, discovering an unexpected talent for creating vivid landscapes. The community rallied around James, offering support in countless ways. Neighbors dropped off groceries or invited him over for dinner. A local church organized a clothing drive, ensuring he had warm coats and sturdy boots for winter. One day, a stranger left a guitar on his doorstep with a note that read, "Everyone needs music in their life." James didn't know how to play, but he decided to learn, watching online tutorials and practicing late into the night. The sound of his clumsy strumming filled the apartment, a reminder of his determination to embrace this second chance. At the diner, employees worked hard to prove they had changed. They greeted every customer with genuine smiles, going out of their way to make them feel welcome. When someone couldn't afford a meal, staff members quietly covered the cost themselves, refusing to let anyone leave hungry. Word of these efforts spread, drawing curious visitors from neighboring towns. Some came to see if the changes were real, others simply wanted to be part of something positive. Slowly but surely, the diner regained its reputation, not as a place where mistakes were made, but as a place where hearts were healed. One evening, during a particularly busy shift, a young man walked in wearing a military uniform. His posture was rigid, his eyes scanning the room nervously. An older waitress recognized him immediately and approached him with care. "Welcome home," she said softly, guiding him to a table near the window. The phrase struck a chord with the soldier, who relaxed slightly as she handed him a menu. Later, when he struggled to pay for his meal, the staff discreetly added it to the community fund, a pool of donations meant to ensure no veteran went hungry. As he left, the young man paused at the door, turning back to thank them. "This means more than you know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Stories like this became common, proof that the diner's transformation was real. Employees took pride in their work, knowing they were making a difference. Customers noticed the change too, leaving heartfelt reviews online or stopping by just to express gratitude. One elderly woman, a regular since the diner's early days, summed it up best. "It feels like home again," she told the owner. Mr. Thompson, though still haunted by guilt, allowed himself a moment of relief. Perhaps redemption wasn't out of reach after all. Meanwhile, James found himself stepping into a role he never imagined: advocate. Local organizations invited him to speak at events, sharing his story to raise awareness about homelessness and PTSD among veterans. At first, public speaking terrified him. Standing in front of crowds, reliving painful memories, it felt overwhelming. But with encouragement from Sarah and his growing network of friends, he found the courage to step onto the stage. Each time he spoke, he emphasized resilience and forgiveness, urging listeners to focus on solutions rather than blame. His words resonated deeply, inspiring action and empathy. The impact of James's advocacy rippled far beyond the town. News outlets revisited his story, highlighting the progress he had made and the changes sparked by his experience. Viewers sent messages of support, many sharing their own struggles or thanking him for giving them hope. Schools incorporated his speeches into lessons about perseverance, showing students that setbacks don't define a person. Veterans groups reached out, inviting him to collaborate on initiatives aimed at supporting those in need. Through it all, James remained humble, deflecting praise and focusing on helping others. Back at the warehouse, James's co-worker surprised him one afternoon with a celebration. Balloons and streamers decorated the break room, and a cake with congratulations written in bold letters sat proudly on the table. His boss explained that James had been chosen as Employee of the Month, recognizing his dedication and positive attitude. As everyone clapped and cheered, James stood frozen, overwhelmed by the gesture. For so long he had felt invisible, unworthy of acknowledgement. Now, surrounded by people who believed in him, he realized how far he had come. The diner celebrated milestones too. On the anniversary of the viral video, Mr. Thompson organized a special event to honor James and thank the community for its support. Tables were set up outside, adorned with flowers and candles. A local band played soft music, creating a festive yet intimate atmosphere. When James arrived, escorted by friends, the crowd erupted into applause. Speeches followed, with speakers praising his strength and humility. James, visibly moved, took the microphone to address the gathering. "I never wanted attention," he began, his voice trembling. "But if my story can help even one person, then it's worth it." That night, as fireworks lit up the sky, the town reflected on how much had changed. What started as a shameful moment captured on camera had grown into a movement of compassion and understanding. People learned to look beyond appearances, to see the humanity in everyone they met. Mistakes were acknowledged, apologies accepted, and bridges rebuilt. Most importantly, lives were transformed, not just James's, but countless others inspired by his journey. In the months that followed, the spirit of kindness continued to flourish. The diner expanded its outreach programs, partnering with schools and businesses to tackle hunger and homelessness. Employees volunteered their time, knowing they were part of something greater than themselves. James remained active in advocacy, traveling to nearby cities to share his story. Yet despite his growing influence, he stayed grounded, cherishing the simple joys of his new life, painting sunsets, playing guitar, and enjoying meals with friends. Though challenges still arose, both James and the diner faced them with resilience. They reminded everyone that growth takes time, that healing isn't linear, and that compassion is a choice we must make every day. And in that small Ohio town, hope burned brighter than ever before, lighting the way for a future shaped by empathy and understanding. As spring arrived, the small Ohio town seemed to bloom alongside the flowers. The diner, once a source of shame, had become a hub of hope and action. Its parking lot was often filled with volunteers loading vans with food and supplies for outreach programs. Inside, walls were adorned with photos of smiling faces, people helped by the diner's efforts over the past months. Employees wore badges that read, "Compassion starts here," a constant reminder of their mission. Customers noticed the difference too, not just in the atmosphere, but in how they felt when they walked out the door. The diner wasn't just feeding bodies anymore. It was nourishing souls. For James, life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. His mornings began with painting sessions, brushes dancing across canvas, as sunlight streamed through his apartment window. He found solace in creating vibrant landscapes, rolling hills, serene lakes, and sunsets ablaze with color. Each stroke seemed to heal a piece of him, replacing old scars with beauty. Neighbors stopped by often, marveling at his talent. One day, a local art teacher offered to display his work in a community gallery. Though hesitant, James agreed, realizing this was another opportunity to share his journey and inspire others. At the warehouse, James thrived in his role, earning promotions and taking on more responsibilities. His coworkers remained steadfast supporters, cheering him on during tough days and celebrating victories big and small. They even formed a band, jokingly calling themselves the Second Chances. James played guitar, his fingers growing steadier with practice. Their makeshift rehearsals turned into Friday night traditions, laughter echoing through the break room as they stumbled through chords and lyrics. Music became a language they all understood, binding them closer together. The diner's outreach. Events grew larger, drawing crowds from neighboring towns. Families brought children to teach them about kindness, while veterans shared stories over plates of pancakes. Local businesses donated generously, providing everything from fresh produce to warm blankets. Even former critics joined in, volunteering their time or offering resources. People who had once called for boycotts now praised the diner's transformation, acknowledging the hard work behind its rebirth. Mr. Thompson, though still haunted by guilt, allowed himself moments of pride as he watched strangers connect over shared meals and common goals. One evening, during a particularly busy event, an elderly woman approached James. Her hands trembled as she clasped his, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. It turned out her son, a veteran, had taken his own life after struggling with PTSD. Hearing James's story gave her hope that others might find help before it was too late. Moved by her words, James promised to keep speaking out, knowing his voice could save lives. That moment stayed with him, fueling his determination to make a difference. James's advocacy reached new heights as invitations poured in from across the country. He traveled to conferences, schools, and community centers, sharing his journey with audiences eager to learn. His message was simple yet powerful. No one should face adversity alone. He spoke candidly about his struggles, homelessness, PTSD, and the loneliness that came with feeling invisible, but always ended with a note of gratitude. "I'm here because people cared," he would say, "and if we care for each other, we can change the world." Back in town, the diner became a model for other businesses looking to make a difference. Owners visited to learn how they could implement similar programs inspired by what they saw. Employees mentored newcomers, teaching them the importance of empathy and inclusion. Regular patrons formed committees, brainstorming ways to tackle issues like affordable housing and mental health support. Slowly but surely, the entire community rallied around a shared vision, a place where everyone belonged. Despite the progress, challenges lingered. Adjusting to his new life wasn't always easy for James. There were nights when memories of war invaded his dreams, leaving him restless and anxious. On those days, he leaned heavily on his support system. Friends, co-workers, and therapists who reminded him he wasn't alone. Writing in his journal helped too, allowing him to process emotions without judgment. Through it all, he held on to the belief that healing was possible even in the darkest moments. At the diner, employees faced their own hurdles. Some struggled with burnout, juggling long hours and emotional labor. Others wrestled with doubts, wondering if their efforts truly made a difference. But every time someone expressed gratitude, a tearful hug, a handwritten note, or simply a smile, it renewed their resolve. They reminded themselves why they started this journey and vowed to keep going, no matter how tough it got. Spring gave way to summer, bringing warmth and energy to the town. The diner hosted its first annual Day of Compassion festival, transforming the parking lot into a vibrant fairground. Booths offered free health screenings, job counseling, and legal aid. Artists painted murals on nearby walls, depicting themes of unity and resilience. A stage featured performances by local musicians, including James and his bandmates. As families picnicked on blankets and children ran laughing through sprinklers, it felt like a celebration of everything they had achieved together. That night, under a sky dotted with stars, James stood at the microphone, addressing the crowd. "A year ago I was invisible," he began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "But today I see you, all of you, and I know we're stronger together." The audience erupted into applause, many wiping away tears. Strangers embraced, united by a shared sense of purpose. In that moment, it was clear that something extraordinary had happened. What began as a shameful incident had grown into a movement of love and understanding. The ripple effects of James's story continued to spread, touching lives far beyond the town. Veterans organizations used his experience to advocate for better resources and policies. Schools incorporated lessons about empathy and resilience into their curriculums. Social media buzzed with updates, photos, and messages of encouragement. People from all walks of life reached out, thanking James for reminding them of humanity's potential for good. Each connection reinforced his belief that compassion, when nurtured, could heal wounds and transform communities. As autumn approached, the town prepared for another season of growth and reflection. The diner expanded its outreach programs, partnering with universities to study effective strategies for combating homelessness. Employees enrolled in training courses, honing skills, in conflict resolution and mental health awareness. Locals organized fundraisers, ensuring resources were available year-round. Everyone worked tirelessly, driven by the knowledge that their efforts mattered. For James, the future looked brighter than ever. His artwork gained recognition, fetching modest prices at galleries and online auctions. Proceeds went toward supporting homeless veterans, creating a cycle of giving that brought him immense joy. At the warehouse, he took on leadership roles, mentoring new hires and spearheading initiatives to hire veterans. Music remained a constant companion, his guitar rarely out of reach. Friends joked that he might release an album someday, though. James laughed it off, content to play for fun. Through it all, James carried a quiet strength, rooted in gratitude and forgiveness. He knew life would never be perfect, but he also knew perfection wasn't the goal. What mattered was the journey, the connections forged, the lessons learned, and the lives touched along the way. And as he stood on the brink of a new chapter, surrounded by people who believed in him, he realized something profound. Second chances weren't just possible. They were powerful. They could turn pain into purpose, despair into hope, and a single act of kindness into a movement that changed the world. Winter returned to the small Ohio town, wrapping it in a blanket of snow and twinkling lights. The diner, now a cherished cornerstone of the community, glowed warmly against the cold night. Its windows were adorned with wreaths and garlands, while inside, the scent of cinnamon and roasted coffee filled the air. Customers gathered around tables sharing stories and laughter as they sipped hot cocoa or ate hearty meals. Outside, volunteers bundled up in coats and scarves handed out care packages to those in need. It was clear that the spirit of compassion had taken root, not just in the diner but in the hearts of everyone who called this place home. For James, the season brought a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. His apartment, once bare and empty, now held traces of life, paintings leaning against walls, a guitar resting in the corner, and shelves lined with books gifted by friends. Each morning he woke to the soft hum of the heater and sunlight streaming through frosty windows. He spent his days painting, writing, and practicing music, finding joy in the simple rhythms of his routine. At night he joined neighbors for holiday gatherings where stories and songs warmed chilly evenings. For so long, James had carried the weight of loneliness. Now surrounded by people who cared, he felt lighter than ever before. The diner continued to thrive, its reputation transformed from one of shame to one of hope. Employees worked tirelessly, not just serving meals but building connections with every customer who walked through the door. They remembered names, noticed struggles, and offered help whenever possible. On particularly busy nights, lines stretched out the door, but no one complained. Instead, patrons chatted happily, swapping tales of kindness they'd witnessed or experienced. The diner had become more than a place to eat. It was a sanctuary, a reminder that even in difficult times, humanity could shine brightly. One snowy evening, an unexpected visitor arrived at the diner. A young woman, her cheeks flushed from the cold, stepped inside hesitantly. She wore a tattered coat and clutched a backpack tightly to her chest. Her eyes darted around the room, unsure if she belonged. Sensing her discomfort, a waitress approached gently, offering her a seat near the fire. "You're safe here," she said with a smile. As the woman warmed up with a bowl of soup, she began to open up. She was a college student who had fallen on hard times after losing her job. With nowhere else to turn, she had wandered into the diner hoping for warmth, and maybe a little kindness. Her story resonated deeply with James, who happened to be volunteering that evening. After hearing about her situation, he introduced himself and shared his own journey. The two talked for hours, bonded by their experiences of struggle and resilience. By the end of the night, plans were already in motion to help her get back on her feet. Local charities provided temporary housing, while the diner staff pooled funds to cover her immediate needs. Watching the community rally around her reminded James of how far they had come since that fateful night months ago. Compassion wasn't just an idea anymore. It was action. As the year drew to a close, the town celebrated together. The diner hosted its annual Night of Gratitude, inviting everyone who had contributed to its transformation. Tables groaned under the weight of homemade dishes, pies, and casseroles. Children ran between chairs, giggling as snowflakes drifted. Past the windows, speeches were given, tears shed, and hugs exchanged freely. When it was James's turn to speak, he stood quietly for a moment, taking in the sea of smiling faces. "This town taught me what it means to belong," he said softly. "And I'll never forget that." His words echoed throughout the room, touching hearts and sparking memories of the journey they had shared. What started as a shameful moment captured on camera had grown into something extraordinary, a testament to the power of forgiveness, empathy, and second chances. People left the diner that night feeling grateful, not just for the food or company, but for the reminder that change was possible when hearts opened wide. The new year brought fresh opportunities for growth. The diner expanded its outreach programs, partnering with schools and hospitals to address issues like hunger, mental health, and affordable housing. Employees became advocates themselves, speaking at conferences and workshops about their experiences. Their story inspired other businesses to follow suit, creating a ripple effect of kindness that reached far beyond the town's borders. Even critics who had doubted the diner's sincerity admitted they were wrong, praising its unwavering commitment to making a difference. James remained at the heart of it all, though he never sought recognition. His advocacy work took him across the country, sharing his story with audiences eager to learn. Yet no matter how far he traveled, he always returned home, grounding himself in the community that had embraced him. Painting, music, and friendships kept him connected, reminding him of the beauty in everyday moments. When asked about his future, he simply smiled. "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be," he would say. Back at the warehouse, James continued to excel, mentoring coworkers and leading initiatives to support veterans. His band, The Second Chances, gained a loyal following, performing at local events and fundraisers. Their music, a mix of heartfelt ballads and upbeat anthems, became a symbol of resilience and hope. Through it all, James stayed humble, deflecting praise and focusing on helping others. He knew his journey wasn't unique. Countless others faced similar struggles. If his story could inspire even one person to reach out for help or offer a hand, it was worth telling. As seasons changed and years passed, the town evolved alongside its people. Challenges arose, as they always do, but the foundation of compassion remained strong. Families taught children the importance of kindness, passing down lessons learned from James and the diner's transformation. Businesses adopted inclusive practices, ensuring everyone felt valued. Strangers became friends, united by a shared belief in the power of empathy. And through it all, James stood as a living testament to the idea that second chances weren't just possible, they were powerful. On quiet evenings, James often sat by the window watching snow fall gently outside. His guitar rested in his lap, fingers idly strumming familiar chords. Memories of the past lingered, the pain of war, the loneliness of homelessness, the sting of rejection, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they shaped him, teaching him the value of resilience and forgiveness. Now, surrounded by love and purpose, he realized something profound. Healing didn't erase scars. It made them part of a larger story, one of hope, connection, and endless possibility. And so life went on in the small Ohio town. The diner buzzed with activity, its doors open wide to anyone in need. Neighbors looked out for one another, knowing that strength lay in unity. James painted sunsets, played music, and spoke out for those whose voices had been silenced. Together, they proved that even in the darkest moments, light could be found, if only we chose to see it. In the end, it wasn't perfection that mattered, but the courage to keep trying, to keep caring, and to believe in the goodness of people. And in that belief, they discovered a truth that would guide them forever. Compassion, when nurtured, had the power to heal the world.